All right, today we're going to dive into an idea that pretty much flips everything we think we know about wealth completely on its head. The argument is that for most of human history, our ancestors lived in what's been called the original affluent society. This whole concept comes from a really groundbreaking essay by an anthropologist named Sahlins, and believe me, it challenges everything we assume about progress. You've heard the story, right? We've all been taught that life for our ancient ancestors was just awful, nasty, brutish, and short. A constant, brutal struggle for survival, just barely hanging on at the edge of starvation. But what if that entire picture, the one that's in all of our textbooks, is just completely wrong? So, this is exactly the gloomy picture that Marshall Sahlins wanted to take apart. He pointed out that we almost always paint hunter-gatherer life as this miserable cycle, where every single ounce of energy was just spent trying to figure out where the next meal was coming from. It's the ultimate dismal science. Sullen starts by arguing that this whole grim picture is built on one single, really flawed assumption, what he calls the myth of scarcity. You see, the way we usually look at it is, well, we're basically projecting our own modern anxieties onto the past. We assume they had infinite wants but really limited resources, which of course would create a constant feeling of not enough. We're judging them by our standards, and from that point of view, yeah, they look incredibly poor. But here's where his argument gets really interesting. It's a brilliant twist. Sahlins says they were affluent, just not in any way we would recognize. He suggests there's not just one path to being wealthy, but two. Okay, before we go any further, let's just lock in on this definition. Affluence is simply having all your material wants easily satisfied. So the really important question isn't how much stuff do you have, it's how do you get to that feeling of having enough? And it turns out there are two very different roads to get there. First, there's our path, the modern way. It's kind of like a treadmill, right? Human wants are seen as infinite, so we're just in a constant race to produce more and more. But Sahlins points to a totally different route, what he calls the Zen path. You get to affluence not by producing a ton, but by desiring very little. And that, he argues, is the path hunter-gatherers took. So, if they took this Zen path and they could easily satisfy their wants, what did that actually mean for their day-to-day life? I mean, how much effort did it really take to live this way? Let's get into the specifics and look at the actual evidence. Forget the image you have in your head of this relentless sun-up-to-sundown grind. Thanks to some incredibly detailed anthropological studies, we can actually see what their work week looked like. And believe it or not, we have hard data on this. Sahlins pulled from really detailed fieldwork, like these time allocation studies from Arnhem Land in Australia. Now, the charts might look a little complex, but basically, researchers meticulously tracked how people spent every single hour of their day. It gives us this incredible window into their lives. And the conclusion from all this research? Honestly, it's nothing short of revolutionary. The average adult spent only about 15 to 20 hours a week on what we'd call subsistence. And that's everything. All the hunting, gathering, and preparing food, all combined. I mean, just to put that into perspective, look at their 15 to 20 hours of work next to our standard 40-hour-plus work week. It's not even in the same ballpark. This suggests they had an absolutely enormous amount of leisure time. And it wasn't just the amount of work, it was the whole vibe of it. It wasn't some 9-to-5 grind. It was sporadic. You know, a few hours of gathering or hunting, and then the rest of the day was yours. It was free for socializing, telling stories, playing games, or just napping. Observers who lived with them consistently said the pace was super relaxed, not strenuous at all. But that brings up a really big question, right? If they had all this free time, why didn't they start accumulating stuff or building bigger villages? Well, the answer gets to the very core of their economic logic, which Sahlins calls the freedom of having less. Sahlins boils it down to this perfect little phrase. For a nomadic people, people who are always on the move, possessions aren't a benefit, they're a burden. I mean, think about it. Anything you own is something you have to carry. So this way of thinking shaped their entire world. First off, mobility just makes having property impractical. Second, they had this deep confidence that their environment would always provide. Why would you hoard food when the entire forest is basically your pantry? And finally, their whole society was built on sharing. Hoarding stuff for yourself was seen as shameful. But being generous, that was the ultimate social value. So, to put it simply, their concept of wealth was the total inverse of ours. It wasn't about accumulation at all.
It was about the freedom that comes from wanting and needing very little.
So after this whole journey into the past, you realize it's not just about ancient history. Sahlins' work really forces us to look in the mirror and ask a much, much bigger question. What is affluence, really? What Sahlins shows us is that true affluence is just a balance between what you have and what you want. Hunter-gatherers got there not by having a lot, but by keeping their desires few and finite, well within what their world could easily give them. And this just totally transforms affluence from being about a pile of goods into a social condition. It's that shared confidence that your needs are going to be met. It's not about what you have, it's about how you feel. And that leaves us with one last, kind of uncomfortable thought. Our modern market economy is, without a doubt, the greatest production machine in human history. It creates a seemingly infinite amount of stuff. But by its own logic of creating infinite wants, has it actually made us affluent? I'll let you think about that one.